Morning chaps, going to talk to you about solar power, the Rockefeller tax, and I'm going to do so on this day that Israel celebrates having the US embassy open in Jerusalem, essentially assigning a kind of capital status to Jerusalem as an Israeli city. And does so with the slaughter of about 54 Palestinians who protesting. Gunned down, live rounds, dead, end of, game over, life no more. I've been to Israel a number of times. I've been to Jerusalem a number of times. It was an Arab city, 100% an Arab city. You had the guys trying to sell you stuff. It's an Arab and a Christian, and it was a divided city, and now it's been taken. The third most religious shrine in Islamic faith is right there in Jerusalem. Of course, the Station of the Cross for Christians is all there, but now it seems it's very much an Israeli city. And almost their capital, and now they're establishing the American embassy. And Trump, from that decision, for all those that are such big Trump fans, and none of these guys are on your team, is always my view, no matter what you think. This slaughter was probably guaranteed. In other words, when they made that decision, there was an outcry. They knew it would cause problems. It caused the problems they predicted it would. It's a provocation. It's kind of like me parking my tank in your lawn and then say, he came out and he shouted at me, so I shot at him and killed him. You know, so it's a problem reaction solution in a mini format. Do something highly provocative, get the expected reaction, which of course young kids who have had nothing but their livelihoods undermined, their land undermined, are going to give their emotional response and then do the action you wanted. Get a bit of slaughter in, get a bit of fresh blood to enjoy the moment in a vampire-like sense. Anyway, I was going to talk about solar panels, but you can't pass on the significance of gunning down 56 people. You know, if they were black and Israelis were deemed the white, this would be Sharpeville, this would be Soweto riots, this would be the equivalent of, there would be howls of racist indignation, there would be screams of apartheid. You get a small twittering of it, but anyway. So the solar panels and the Rockefellers and Rothschilds largely established Israel, particularly the Rothschilds with the Balfour Agreement. With the help of the Rothschilds, the Rockefellers monopolized oil and created the petrodollar, which to this day is entrenched. And anybody who does anything that challenges it will have democracy and regime change exported to their nation state and will be slaughtered like a pig for all others to recognize. So think of the hanging of Saddam. What a barbaric and brutal event that was done by the West. Think of the absolute drag through the streets, beaten up and then shot dead Gaddafi. That's how we roll. And if you need other examples, you can refer to any nation state that has at any point threatened, for which Iran has teetered somewhat closely with the notion of selling oil in anything other than $1. Imagine having a commodity and being obliged and dictated to on what terms you do basis with that commodity. Imagine I told you, as New World Order construct man, that your farm in America where you grow maize, you have to only sell in rands. Because I'm South African and I want the rand as the problem. You have to only, it doesn't matter if you're not in South Africa and you're not selling to South Africans. I'm dictating it, and if you don't, I'm coming to your farm and I'm going to publicly slaughter you in the most barbaric fashion in the name of exporting democracy. Anyway, so while I have a wee rant on that, let's talk about the solar fact. Just chatting with some very interesting guys that I met from Acapulco, and about technology, people with contacts in the solar industry, for example. Now, there's no getting around this. Energy is a farce. There is no shortage of energy, and there's no reason why we ever would have or should have ever had to pay $100 oil at any point in recent history, but we have. And why is that? I call it the Rockefeller Tax. Understand the Rockefeller Tax. When there is a boom and they create liquidity through their banking cartel system with interest rates that's too low and property assets hypervaluations and out bubbles, as we've had in 2008, where pump and dump, everybody got to buy, subprime, all the banks colluded in the name of creating this bad debt pots that later got churned into collateralized debt obligations and sold to investment companies who didn't understand what they were buying and bought toxic bombs with people whose mortgages were going to reset and blow up in their faces, and the payment would triple at the end of their 2-year discount period, and they were told they could refinance with someone else and get a new discount period, but they didn't mention that only if the property value keeps going up infinitum. But anyway, all that aside, with that banking cartel, what they do is when people are making money through the paper appreciation of their asset class, their home, for example, what they then do is people start spending and are rich. Now, oil is one of those things, or energy consumption is one of those things that is in everything you do. So oil is in the plastic bags you buy, it's in the packaging when you buy goods, it's in the transportation of your item. If you have Amazon, there's a delivery guy that drives a car, more purchases online. Even though you're not driving to the shop yourself, someone is driving for you. There is oil in everything. So it's a tax on economic activity. And I call it the Rockefeller tax because if you were the original Standard Oil monopolist and your company got broken into 1 million pieces, but you actually continue to own it, in other words, you are Exxon, you are Engen, you are all the major oil players, and you are supporting the Ponzi scheme of the US dollar, petrodollar functionality. And this is the reason why a totally bestial, barbaric Saudi Arabia kingdom. Note how no one talks about feminism regarding Saudi Arabia. The media doesn't do much about feminism there. Feminism is about a Swedish thing and an English thing and an American thing. In this bestial country, women can be buried up to their heads and stoned for being teenage pregnant. And all sorts of barbarism that just doesn't get highlighted. Why? Because they play the game on the petrodollar. Morals when it suits. It's great to have morals when it suits, and when other higher needs are sought, those morals are not mentioned and do not stand in the way of conducting business with hierarchical, medieval monarchy of barbaric proportions in Saudi. In other words, the Saudi and Israel are two versions of sophisticated warlords, barbaric nation states that actually, while pretending to hate each other, co-opt against the likes of Iran and Syria immensely. But going back to the solar panels, we'll get there eventually, chaps. The solar panels, this high contact industry says, in fact, the state of technology on solar panels is so far advanced that you have virtually the 180-degree panel that without even moving around and having to track the sun is so efficient and so effective that it will even take charge and energy at night of moonlight and street lamps. That's how sensitive and powerful the solar is. But there's a kicker and a catch. Only the government in America has access to them. They cannot be privately purchased. So let's just take that thought for a moment and think, hang on a minute, there's a technology that exists that takes the current solar panels that you buy, top of the range. You go into a store to put solar panels on for your house, to heat your pool, to heat your hot water, whatever the case may be, to make you more energy efficient. And you cannot purchase, actually, currently, a quantum leap power level for no amount of money technology, except, wait for it, there's some other states where he thinks it's possible you may get, Israel. Of course, most of you that have any understanding of technology and the F-16s and fighter planes, how very quickly those same planes end up being in the very advanced vanguard of Israel's armor. And in fact, America often does discount sales at well below even replacement cost, to the extent of 10% of various planes, allegedly, and that America actually sends more money to any one state for aid then there sends it no more money than any other state than Israel, the highest recipient of American aid. So all of these things pointed out, it shouldn't come as a surprise maybe that you have extreme technology that is cutting edge and that is only available to the US government, not available to anyone to purchase. And ask yourself why. Ask yourself why. We have the beginning of the battery car era, which no doubt Musk was given the nod by the Rockefellers to be the man who eventually will be allowed to kill, along with all the other car makers. I'm not saying it's only Musk, but he's exclusively a battery car operator. BMW are already doing the wireless charging, where you park over it and it's like your mobile phone. You don't even have to be plugged in. All of this is coming. They've been given the nod and the mandate to kill the combustion engine. In other words, we're transitioning from the Rockefeller tax for car oil consumption. Don't forget airlines and all these other things that actually don't pay the same tax we pay. 80% tax on oil here in the UK. It's not as high in other countries, but 80% of it is tax for the government, a punishment for using a car. The airlines don't pay any. Well, they don't not pay any, but they pay on a much different way that is far more amicable for their business model and at a much lower level. But anyway, so how are these guys allowing these car manufacturers to go ahead? They're going to slowly allow them over time to kill the combustion engine car. So we all know the Google driverless cars are coming, and we've seen the battery cars making progress. But if they were to allow these solar panels out that everyone could buy at a reasonable margin, let's say the company making 35% normal profits in an economic model on revenue, you would no longer need grid. And they're not ready for you to have that. You would no longer need grid of power from the electricity providers, the gas providers at all. You could go everything electric, and you could drive it all off solar, and you could even still take charge at night from moonlight and street lamp light. Can you believe that? You can shine a torch at reasonable range and still generate some element of power off of that. As fast as you're running your battery down, you can actually be collecting some of it back on these panels. Why do you think such an obviously, if we are so in need of global warming, all these things set up by the Rockefellers, the United Nations, the World Economic Forum, the IMF, the financial arm, are also saying that the biggest issue we face is global climate change? If the biggest issue is global climate change, and remember what I've said on this before, on previous videos, remember what I've said on this in previous videos, and if you haven't seen the previous videos, maybe go have a little look. But the reason why we have global issues is because it justifies a global response, which therefore undermines the nation states' mechanisms of law and implementation. That means you get supernatural governments that actually have remit and dictate what nation states can do, moving you towards one world government. And this is always the game. So global issues, whether they're agreed or disagreed upon by people, the minute they get you having the argument and picking a side, you are arguing about what actually requires a global response in some way or not. And this is exactly what they want. They don't care if there's people for and against. They want global issues to be brought to the fore because it recognizes the need for an impartial global reference point, so that governments no longer make decisions they can refer to, well, the World Economic Forum on Climate Change Committee said X, Y, and Z, and we are just complying with that. In other words, you vote for your national government and they bend over for some world government that you don't know who funds. I happen to have a view, as I've already expressed, and some of you may too, what their agenda is, and how they all work together in combination with other world-based powers. So here you have a setup where you have a technology that could get you all off electricity grid. This could stop people, get everyone into a battery car that could be solar powered. Even here in Britain, where it doesn't shine, the efficiency of solar power, I had it on my home right here, is such already that it's worthwhile in Britain. With this new technology, you could literally live in Finland in winter and you would still pick up sufficient power to power your home. Iceland. So it's incredibly powerful. It's a quantum leap, and you don't get access to its purchase. Why is that? Why is that? We're trying to save the goddamn planet, aren't we? Why is that? We should all have access to purchase. Government should do a subsidy, and you would throw out every electricity provider you've ever had. They would become maybe a backup guy that you used for a few hours when your panels broke or they were being fitted. In other words, every major electricity power company would be obliterated. But what about the smart meter and selling everything back, and the Internet of Things and all the devices that are going to spy on you that are going to be introduced by those same utility companies? What about this? What about that? Oh, it's a problem. You see, it's actually not about global climate. It's not about global climate. If we can all go solar, our footprints of everybody, companies, private companies needing huge power, Bitcoin mining, all sorts of things, that would become so goddamn cheap. So cheap to virtually, apart from the capital costs, the payback period would be insane. What are they going to do? Well, when they eventually release it, they'll jack the cost up so high that it's more like a 5-10 year payback period. But in fact, the payback in a normal environment with a normal margin profit would be so quick that everyone would be literally saving all their electricity and gas bills. It would be a thing of the past. Think about what you pay a month on all of those, and think about what you would pay on your petrol bill if instead you could have a battery-based car that was solar powered within minutes, with that in the roof of the vehicle. How your petrol bill would go, and what that would mean for Mr. Rockefeller Tax. In other words, the great skim globally, when we are globally buoyant after the banks pump capital into the world, the great tax skim that gives these companies such a big largesse, $100 oil plus, etc., etc. What would that do to the petrodollar? Come down, let's ask the big question: what does it do to the goddamn petrodollar? And here is the rub. The end thereof. The end of oil-based nation states relying on oil consumption. The end of wars for securing resources such as oil, gas and pipelines. Think the Middle East. Everybody becomes totally independent. On the rays that I'm feeling on my skin right now, on the size of this hand, I can power my phone and everything else. I can have those panels in my car, I can have them on the boot. I don't ever have to pay petrol charges anymore. Think of what that does to the petrodollar. Why is it being held back? And this is not one example of technology being held back. I want to tell you, my father was an engineer in the 70s and worked with the Germans on battery-based cars when the first OPEC was served. They killed that project. They killed that project and said battery cars will not be allowed to be sold in America. California was one of the key states. Later, the A-Class Mercedes, that with the flat sides, the very narrow flat sides, that fell over in the corner because it used to have too big a sail area from the side if the wind blew and too small a wheelbase. It fell over in the corner. It was eventually had to get modified and new suspension and everything. Do you know why? It was made as a flat belly battery car. It's been wanting to come up for ages. They had to reconvert the whole project to combustion engine. Instead of having that super low belly pan of battery and a super low center of gravity, it then got blown over in the bends with its small wheelbase being this baby Mercedes, and they had to modify it because it was converted back to petrol. It's been killed many times. In other words, the technology and the capability is there. But the controllers of what is allowed to succeed and when it's allowed to succeed will defend the petrodollar. Will defend the petrodollar in the same way they murdered Gaddafi and murdered in a primitive fashion Saddam Hussein and murder anybody else who talks about selling their energy, not in dollars. That's right. Think about all of that. Think about the holdback on your technology and ask yourself, wow, who are these guys? Here on this day, as Israel butchers Palestine, now an almost negligence part of the overall land. Go look at the map since 47, 68, right the way through to today, how the continual expanding in a slow motion, multi-generational invasion, which involves murder at every point of resistance, murder usually of children, teenagers, etc. On that day, think about your friend Rockefeller, the kind of guy he is, the kind of lineage, family lineage he has, and think about the technology that is held back. Think about what people really could do if they really meant reducing carbon footprint, and why it isn't being rolled out like grease lightning. Everyone would embrace it, everyone would buy it for economic reasons, even if they didn't believe in global warming, to no longer have to pay petrol prices here in the UK with an 80% tax, scrapping your diesel engines only for them apparently to a cleaner version coming out and being reworked, all this in between. Why don't we just go straight to the point of our battery driven car with solar panels? So effective, it's charged and ready to go in 15-20 minutes. We could start that revolution right today, and all this attacking the driver could be gone, and the petrodollar could end. But who wants that to happen? Anyway, long clip for you to think about here on this sunny day. Sunny for us. Let's send wishes to those that it wasn't as fortunate a day for, and hope for the day that reset comes and justice comes. By the way, also doing on the 17th our how to make money in the falling markets webinar, 19:30 GMT. Don't miss it.